I'm speaking today with Sam, a 21-year-old lesbian and digital artist in the US. Sam creates artwork specifically for the lesbian and gay community, and like many content creators on social media, she's faced backlash for her work not being inclusive enough of the LGBTQ plus community. Sam, thanks so much for talking with me today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as an artist?
I'm Sam, I'm 21. I've been doing digital art now for, I want to say, like 10 years or so. I started when I was around 11 years old with my first tablet and then kind of just got hooked from there. A lot of the art that I do is very detail oriented, but I really do take a lot of time to capture gay and lesbian relationships. A lot of my subject matter are women as well, so that's kind of been my thing, for the longest time now. So that's kind of how I am art-wise, and I guess more personally, I am a lesbian. Being a lesbian is a huge thing for me. It's something that I've been, deeply proud of for as long as I've been out, which isn't very long, but it is something that I'm proud of. So that's kind of my biggest inspiration for art, women, and then the lesbians I've met personally, as well as just in the community in general that I get to meet.
What inspires your work? Do you draw from real life, people you know, or, where do you get your inspiration from?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I know a lot of the people that I draw are, I guess, actors and actresses, characters from different games, TV shows, movies. I do draw people in my life quite often as well. And then a lot of my inspiration comes from, I guess, the world around me. Food is a big thing. I've been super, I guess, into drawing different food and doing recipe illustrations since I was in middle school. I tend to go more towards realism when it comes to style, but I really try to marry realism with really light pastel colors or interesting subject matter. So that's kind of where I am with art, I guess, stylistically, and where I take my inspiration from.
What made you choose digital as opposed to a different medium?
Yeah, so I usually use my iPad and just an Apple Pencil, really, and then software-wise, I'm a big fan of Procreate. It lets you do quite a lot pretty portably with the iPad. I got into digital art actually just because I was looking for something that allowed me to work, I guess, from anywhere I wanted to. So when I was in school, as long as I had my laptop and my tablet, I could draw during lunch, I could draw during free period. And then, I did, I guess, have a few health issues throughout high school. And if I was ever in the hospital or sick, I was always able to draw because all I needed was just my laptop and my tablet. And more recently, all I need is my iPad and the pencil. So it was really accessible for me as a teen kind of going through it, but also it was something that let me draw from anywhere I wanted, which was good just because I was able to draw from real life. People watching, especially when you go to a big school, is one of the best things you can do to improve your visual library as an artist.
So obviously being a digital artist, it's natural that you would put your work on social media. So how long have you been, I guess you posted on Instagram or other sites as well? How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so I started with DeviantArt when I was around 13 years old, and then I expanded to Tumblr and Instagram, and I do use Twitter pretty regularly as well recently. So I started with DeviantArt, and now I've kind of expanded to Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, and occasionally I will post a few pieces of art to Reddit as well.
One of the reasons that we were talking today is because you mentioned to us that you've experienced some backlash or censoring on social media. Was it just Instagram, or can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been Tumblr, Instagram, and DeviantArt are the main places you get a little bit of flack. I know, especially during Pride Month, there's a big push to post art for everyone, and I'm not in any way trying to say that you shouldn't, but I've noticed, when it comes time for Pride Month, or I guess there's a month specifically for lesbians, I'm stating, hey, I'm an artist who does work, exclusively for lesbians and gay men. This is where my art is centered. I've received a lot of backlash. A big thing within fandom spaces, especially on Tumblr, is anytime a character's sexuality is up for interpretation, the automatic assumption is that that character is bi or pan, which is a perfectly okay way to take things. But I've noticed that anytime I've headcanoned a lesbian or a character as a lesbian, I have received backlash, and I have received people not taking it well at all, that, I specified this is, I draw women, I draw lesbians, that's what I do. So that's kind of where I've noticed the most backlash. Tumblr, Twitter, and I've received a little bit of flack, but it's nowhere near the amount of, I guess, commentary I get from Tumblr, Twitter, and occasionally Instagram.
Yeah, I remember Tumblr being pretty, like, it can have a lot of value, but there can be a lot of toxic environments there too.
Especially if you have the anon feature turned on, I've found that
Oh
it can
yeah.
be nice to get, little messages here and there, or people asking for doodle requests, which is something I do every month. I'll open up my ask box and ask people if they'd like me to draw anything. I sketch it, and then I'll send it to them, or I'll post it. And it was a lot of fun, but I did notice that when I had the anon feature on, I was getting a lot more, I guess, bold comments about my art than if I kind of kept it to, I guess, known faces only.
So is the idea that, these characters that you're drawing, everyone wants you to interpret them as bisexual, and the fact that you're not doing that is what's getting the backlash?
I'd say definitely, in the case of characters with, I guess, up to interpretation sexualities or no defined sexuality, not headcanoning them as bisexual or pansexual. I've had people say that I'm trying to erase bisexuals and pansexuals, which is definitely never something that I want to do, but that definitely has been the case of, I guess, people seeing a character whose sexuality is up for interpretation and then, I guess, getting upset that maybe I didn't interpret it the same way that a majority of the group did.
Yeah, it seems interesting that they would accuse you of erasing, someone's sexuality, even though that sexuality is not established. So, how is this? Have you, had any of your work like censored, or, anyone report posts on Instagram or anything like that?
On Instagram, yeah, I did. There was a graphic I found through Pinterest. The drawing was of a gender nonconforming woman, Butch more specifically, kind of dressed as a superhero. And I'm assuming it's because the word dyke was used, the art got taken down.
It seems like this sort of backlash against homosexuality in light of the new like gender movement is really only gained momentum in the past decade. So, with you being part of a younger generation, what was it like to come out as a lesbian in this current culture? Like, did you ever face any backlash on a personal level, or were like encouraged or pressured to adopt a more inclusive identity or anything like that?
Oh, for sure. I think for me, me and my friends joke that I was kind of a migratory bird within the LGBT community. Um, there was a time period where a lot of, I guess, I displayed a lot of traits of somebody who had body dysmorphia, and via that, I was led to believe that I had gender dysphoria. And after I was able to really understand that that wasn't the case, I identified as bisexual slash pansexual, and then I didn't come out as a lesbian until around a year ago. And I think for me, it was extremely difficult to really come out and really process my sexuality when we had things like the Mogai community, or the split attraction model, or even the lesbian master doc. I found to be very difficult to read through and, process my feelings. So that, combined with a lot of outside influence, I think. I had people telling me, oh, I think you're this, or oh, I think that you should consider this. And to the point where in my high school friend circle, I'd had someone who said, oh, all lesbians are TERFs. And that really, as someone who was really young and impressionable, that set me kind of in the wrong mindset to begin with. So I think there was a lot of pressure. And even now that I do know who I am, and now that I am very firm in how I feel, I'll occasionally get the rare person of, oh, well, you know, you mean you're attracted to non-men, right? And it's like, no, women. And there's kind of a push to use a language that's very inclusive for something that, in my opinion, is very deeply personal and very deeply private, and something that you should be able to cherish, the most yourself. Instagram will allow you to use the word queer, but they took down my post that said dyke. And I've seen a big artist that I'm a huge fan of. Recently, she came out in a video. She had said, I don't want to just call myself a lesbian. I want to call myself queer because it's more inclusive. And I think, well, that's her choice. I kind of stung a little bit because your dating pool isn't somewhere to be inclusive. The language that you use to refer to your sexuality is something deeply personal.
Yeah, it's interesting that this whole idea of inclusivity is being sort of forced upon us to include, and something that really should be very exclusive, who you choose to have relationships with and who you're attracted to, which is obviously not, who we're attracted to is not something we can control. And it's pretty disturbing to see how that has infiltrated sexual orientation to the point where, queer, which used to be a slur against homosexual people, is now, it really doesn't mean anything. So it's like when someone says I'm queer, what does that mean?
I think my frustration with queer is just that I'm from the South, so that was used as an insult. It still is. So whenever I hear someone say the queer community, I'm like, that's a slur. That's not something that usually me and my friends when I was in high school or even in middle school would use, because it was generally understood that that's a derogatory term. So
Yes.
That's definitely something that's kind of jarring, especially if you've got trauma with that word, to see and tap people you don't know refer to you as queer is kind of worse, just because you're almost expected to respond positively. And if you don't, a lot of people view that as a dog whistle, or you not, I guess, being supportive of them when you just don't want to be called a slur.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know like a lot of people, actual, gay, lesbian, bisexual people have chosen to reclaim the word for themselves, which, has happened with different slurs in different communities. But
Right.
It's interesting that, people who are not gay or lesbian are calling themselves this word now to mean pretty much whatever they want it to mean. So I feel like that's the use of it as a slur is still very much active. I think most of us who grew up in the South, as you did, and I grew up for a while in the South as well, I think we've all heard that word used against us, or against
Right.
someone that we know. So yeah, I totally get that.
When it comes to I guess hearing straight people use that word, or just anybody use it, there's been times where I've been on YouTube and instead of saying the LGBT community, the YouTuber who was a straight man was like, oh, the queer community. And it made me uncomfortable because I don't think that he's aware that that's a slur. And it's come to the point where we're encouraging people to use this word that can hurt people without giving them the knowledge of what the word means and its origins.
And I think it comes back to this idea of inclusivity, where even the LGB or the LGBT or LGBTQ, even that is considered not inclusive enough. So now we just use this blanket term queer that covers anyone, and it doesn't really mean anything. So have you been able to connect with other content creators who have had a similar experience or been impacted in similar ways as you?
A few people do. I know that recently one thing that I've taken time to do is to reach out to a few other lesbian artists, and I've reached out to them and I've had some pretty good conversations. And I guess in doing this interview, I guess when I found out I was going to do it, I was like, okay, well, how do I want to define my art going forward? How do I want to, I guess, express how I feel, and how do I want to be genuine? And I think in talking to them, I've kind of been able to figure that out. So this past week or so, it's been really the first time I've been able to reach out with confidence and kind of not care about the perception of what I'm doing when it comes to creating that kind of art. So it's been pretty good for my self-esteem as an artist, and it's been good just to hear, the enthusiasm from other lesbian artists. So that's definitely been a plus this week.
Do you have any, advice for other, lesbian or gay, bisexual artists and content creators, for who are dealing with this kind of thing and censorship and backlash, on anything you could advise them on how to cope with this situation, or what do you think is the best way to address it?
It's kind of a cheesy answer, but I think knowing that what you're doing is not wrong and that you shouldn't feel ashamed, but also finding a good group of people, even if it's, someone you're close with in real life, or who doesn't do art, who agrees with you, to have that support. I think another thing is making sure that you're taking safety precautions. Recently, I've made the effort to realize if I am going to post art like this, and if I am going to post about my feelings, towards the LGBT community, I mean, as a lesbian, I need to make sure I'm protecting myself and my mental health. So things like not taking on more than you can handle, maybe answering hate questions just isn't something that you're able to do. Maybe you have to keep an account private. Maybe you don't, post images of your face. Or finding good community, taking necessary safety precautions to keep yourself feeling good, because it's hard to create art, in any regard when you're not feeling good. But it's going to be especially hard if you're pushing yourself to create content and you're allowing people to come into your space and say things that aren't true, or to say things that aren't kind. And then Discord servers are a great place if you feel like your art's being taken down a lot, if you feel like people aren't seeing it. A Discord server may be the best fix for that, where you can vet people and you can have like-minded people who will support you, come to that chat, and then you kind of remove the need to go through a bunch of safety measures. But Discord, I'd say, is pretty good for forming community if you can't find one easily by yourself.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences or your thoughts on, the current LGBTQ culture and, how you think we should move forward from all this?
The main thing I think that I really, really, I guess, have been thinking about recently is just like how lesbians and gay men and even bisexual people, how we as a community kind of need each other. And I think it's important to think critically, and I think it's important that moving forward we really analyze the purpose of a lot of the conversations we're having and look at a lot of our individual behavior. I think it's kind of sad for me to see lesbians say, oh, I can't post about being a lesbian, or gay men say, oh, I can't post about being gay. The biggest thing I would advocate just for anybody is just to be kind and to think about how what you're doing affects other people. If you're sending anonymous hate messages to someone, or if you're actively having the belief that all lesbians are TERFs, or that, being a lesbian is wrong because it's exclusionary, really think about how what you're saying can hurt someone, and how what you're saying, if it bears any truth, or if what you're saying is constructive. So I think my biggest thing, I guess, moving forward, that I think everybody really needs to hear is to take a second to think about if what you're saying and doing is constructive, if it has a purpose, and if your actions have harm, how can you get a better perspective, I guess, on what you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the challenges that is, we'll get people saying, oh, well, lesbians who don't want to date, males are hurting these males who identify as women. So we have them claiming that they're being hard on this side, whereas so it makes it harder to sort of defend our position. Is that kind of what you've experienced?
Yeah, for sure. I think even doing this interview, I remember yesterday night I was sitting down and I was like, oh my God, am I going to be perceived negatively? Am I going to get hate? Should I keep my socials private? Should I let you share my Instagram or my Twitter or wherever else so I can meet more people? And it was difficult. And I remember this morning I was just frustrated because it was like, I hate the fact that speaking with you guys is considered something akin to speaking to a hate group, or is considered something that is selling out your community or doing something hateful. And it's just, there's no critical thinking in that, because that's just not the case. So it's frustrating for me to know that even in just talking to you, there's people in my personal life and people online who would say that what I'm doing right now is akin to something that's a hate crime or that's evil. I just don't see any truth in that. So I think it's hard, when you see things like that, to form community, but also I think it's hard for people who mean well, who hear these things, to really think critically.
I think, if you hear something being branded, a hate crime or hate speech, I think we're trained as, people who want to do the right thing. People are sort of trained to see that as instantly bad, and you don't question it. You hear that, and oh, well, obviously it must be terrible. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your thoughts with us. And like you said, it is a terrible sort of place to be in at the moment. And even with LGBT Alliance, I know many of the members use pseudonyms, the members and volunteers. because they feel exactly as you do. They've either had personal experiences where they've, faced backlash in their real life that has, genuinely affected their, livelihood, or they're just afraid of something happening to them that has happened to so many people already, in different ways. So you're definitely not alone.
I think it's good to know there's people who, I guess, are similar minded. And I think it's good to know that, you guys are definitely doing your part to present, I guess, clear information and, help people. So I think that's definitely something that's been a positive about this whole situation. It's just that hopefully with time, other people are able to read critically and form their own opinions as well.
Yeah, I think that's the idea, is to just put information out there and put the facts out and put sources out and try to put, just sort of not biased, critical arguments that hopefully will resonate with more and more people. I think that's the idea.